Welcome, dear dreamer, to Whispers of the Night tonight. We continue our gentle journey into a tale of wonder and quiet beauty, The Princess and the Glass Garden, Part 2. Before we begin, allow yourself to settle into comfort, whether you are lying down in your bed or resting in a favorite chair. Here, in this soft space, stories meet silence, and silence turns into sleep. If you enjoy these bedtime journeys, don't forget to follow Whispers of the Night. Subscribing means you'll never miss a moment of calm, a new story, or a gentle whisper carried into your evenings. Every night, you can return here for a space of rest and dreamlike escape, where stories are told not to rush you, but to cradle you into sleep. This story is woven slowly, with tenderness and care, just like the glass blossoms within the princess's hidden garden. Together, we will wander through its luminous paths, listening to echoes of memory and song. So let the world outside fall quiet and let your heart open to stillness. Tonight, you are safe, you are welcome, and you are exactly where you are meant to be. Soon, we will begin. But first, let us prepare to relax deeply, so that when the tale unfolds, it carries you gently into rest. Before we step further into Elara's story, let us take a few moments to relax deeply so that your body, your breath, and your mind can prepare for rest. Close your eyes if they are not already closed. Take a long, slow breath in through your nose, hold for just a moment, and then let it drift out gently through your lips. Imagine that with each exhale, you are letting go of a little weight from your day, worries, distractions, and lingering thoughts, all dissolving into the night air. Picture yourself standing in a quiet garden at dusk. The air is cool but soft, carrying a faint shimmer of mist. Around you, luminous glass blossoms glow faintly, like lanterns scattered across the ground. Their petals catch the light in subtle rainbow hues, each one bending into colors that seem alive, yet still peaceful, unhurried. You walk slowly along a winding path. Each step is gentle, almost weightless, as though the earth welcomes you, guiding you forward. The mist curls along your ankles, cool yet comforting, and the sound of your breath is steady, even unbroken. Ahead, you see the great heart-shaped bloom. Its surface glimmers with red crystal veins, glowing faintly like embers held in glass. You do not need to move closer, only to let the sight of it calm you, reminding you of beauty that grows even in silence. Take another deep breath in and out. Your shoulders soften. The muscles in your arms and legs loosen, heavy with rest. The rhythm of your heart slows, steady as the quiet glow of the blossoms around you. Now imagine lying down gently in this garden. The cool mist rests above you like a soft blanket, the glass petals glowing faintly in the twilight. Above, the stars drift into place, each one twinkling faintly, like a silent promise of dreams to come. as you breathe. The garden breathes with you, the mist shifting slowly, the petals glimmering, the world itself slowing down. And in this stillness, you are safe. You are peaceful. You are ready to drift deeper, to let go, and to step gently into the story of Princess The Princess and the Glass Garden, Part 2. The Echo of Light. After the bloom in the first garden awakened laughter in the palace. Princess Elara found herself walking more slowly through the long corridors than she ever had before. The air seemed lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had absorbed a touch of the joy that had escaped the garden's glass petals. It was subtle at first, fleeting glimmer in the corner of her eye, a soft tingle along her fingertips whenever she brushed against the carved stone banisters, but it persisted. Each morning, the sunlight, now warmer than it had ever been, fell differently across the courtyard, catching on the silver spires and scattering delicate reflections as if the palace itself remembered the garden's magic. Elara began to notice how ordinary things carried traces of the extraordinary. A stray feather, caught in the morning breeze, shimmered faintly with colors that reminded her of the crystals in the garden. A quiet draft of wind stirred the curtains in her chambers, and for a moment, she could almost hear the faintest echo of glass petals brushing against one another, humming in a melody that no one else in the palace could hear. She realized that the garden was no longer confined to its walls. Its light, its laughter, and its subtle whisperings were following her, tracing her steps through the palace halls, and even seeping into her dreams. At night, the shimmer appeared most vividly as she lay beneath the high, arched ceilings of her chambers. The soft glow from the courtyard seemed to grow, spilling across the room like molten silver and pale gold. The shadows of her furniture stretched and swirled, forming shapes that resembled delicate blooms frozen in motion. The palace was alive in a way she had never noticed before, though the living beings that had once filled its hall servants, musicians, and courtiers remained distant and quiet, their movements subdued, as if they too were waiting for the garden's magic to reach them. Elara closed her eyes and let the light carry her into sleep. In her dreams, she walked through corridors that seemed impossibly long, lined with glass flowers that glimmered under starlight. Some flowers swayed gently, their petals opening to reveal miniature scenes. A bird taking its first flight, a child laughing in a sunlit courtyard, a pair of old friends sharing a quiet conversation on a marble bench. Each bloom was a memory, and the soft shimmer that followed her became a river of recollection, carrying fragments of joy, sorrow, and wonder that had once been hidden behind the palace walls. When morning arrived, Elara felt both restless and exhilarated. The glow lingered at the edges of her vision as she walked through the palace courtyard, and she noticed, for the first time, details that she had once overlooked. Tiny cracks in the paving stones caught the light in unexpected ways, reflecting it into tiny rainbow fragments. The ivy climbing along the courtyard walls seemed to hum with energy, its leaves catching hints of the garden's brilliance. Even the fountains, which had been silent for decades, shimmered faintly with refracted light, as if the water remembered the rhythm of the laughter that had filled the palace before the walls had fallen silent. She wandered further than she had ever dared before, following the soft glow as it drifted just ahead of her. Every step she took felt guided, purposeful, though she could not name the destination. The glow led her to corners of the palace she had never explored, narrow passageways lined with carvings of mythical creatures, staircases that wound spirally into forgotten towers, and archways that opened onto terraces overlooking gardens she had only seen in sketches. The shimmer seemed almost alive, moving with a gentle urgency, encouraging her to step lightly, to observe closely, to listen. The palace was no longer a quiet cage of stone, and Memoriette was a living map of secrets and wonder, all of which seemed to converge toward something she had yet to see. Elara's curiosity grew with every step, matched by a gentle, almost reverent anticipation. She began to wonder if there were other gardens, hidden as carefully as the first, waiting for her to discover them. The notion that the glass garden's light might not be confined to one courtyard filled her with both excitement and trepidation. Could it be possible, she asked herself, that the entire palace, or even the lands beyond it, were threaded with these echoes of beauty, shining in secret? As the days passed, the soft glow became a constant companion. She noticed it most clearly in the quietest moments, when she paused beside the fountain to watch water droplets shimmer in the morning sun, when she traced her fingers along the carved edges of the balcony railings, or when she leaned out to the terrace, letting the cool evening air brush against her face. The shimmer seemed to respond to her attention, growing brighter and more deliberate whenever she lingered. Sometimes it pulsed gently, as though it were breathing in rhythm with her own heart, carrying messages she could not yet understand. She began to think of it not as a mere reflection or trick of light, but as a living presence, patient and watchful, waiting for her to take the next step. Her dreams became increasingly vivid, almost as if the palace itself was guiding her through an unspoken story. Each night, she would walk through hallways lined with translucent flowers, stepping over streams of light that wound like ribbons across polished stone floors. The air carried faint whispers, sometimes laughter, sometimes song, sometimes unrecognizable murmurs that made her heart ache with longing. She knew the garden's echo was calling her, but not merely to witness beauty. It was inviting her to understand, to feel, to participate in the quiet magic that had been waiting for someone with an open heart. One evening, as the last rays of sun melted behind the spires, Elara paused at the edge of the courtyard. The soft glow had gathered there in a delicate pool, reflecting both the fading sky and the glass petals hidden within the shadows. She knelt to touch it lightly with her fingertips, and the shimmer responded instantly, rippling outward in waves of muted color silver, pale gold, lavender, and soft blue. She felt warmth and gentle energy radiating through her hands, and for a moment it was as if the palace itself was exhaling, releasing centuries of quiet and stillness. In that instant, she understood that the garden's magic had never been bound by walls. It had always been a living thread, waiting to weave itself through the palace, through her dreams, and perhaps beyond. Elara rose slowly, standing barefoot on the cool stone. She lifted her eyes to the horizon, where the spires caught the last glimmer of twilight. And she saw, or thought she saw, faint traces of light dancing beyond the palace gates. They were small, almost imperceptible, yet persistent. A shiver of anticipation ran down her spine. The garden's echo was calling her further, hinting at paths that had yet to be walked, wonders yet to be discovered, and secrets that would reveal themselves only to those who dared to follow. The glow followed her into her chambers that night, spilling softly across the floor and walls, draping the room in gentle luminescence. She lay down upon her bed, the shimmer settling like a blanket around her, and watched as the patterns of light danced across the ceiling. Memories of the garden, of the laughter it had released, and of the tender magic she had awakened drifted into her mind like petals in a quiet stream. Sleep came easily, and with it came dreams of corridors that stretched beyond memory, of blossoms that reflected not only light but music and song, and of a gentle, persistent glow that seemed to promise that the garden's wonders were only the beginning. When dawn arrived, the first light of morning mingled with the echo of the garden, spilling through her window in pale lavender and gold. Elara rose, feeling lighter than she had in years, her heart open to possibilities she had never considered. The palace, once a place of quiet solitude, was no longer silent. Somewhere beyond the familiar courtyards, beyond the walls she had always known, a world of glass and shimmer awaited her discovery. She could almost feel it, alive and patient, ready for her steps to trace its paths and for her presence to awaken its secrets once more. And so, with careful, deliberate steps, Princess Elara moved through the palace, barefoot, serene, and full of quiet wonder. The echo of the garden's light lingered behind her, following her as if to remind her that even the smallest shimmer could hint at something infinitely larger, and that beauty, joy, and magic were always waiting for those who would notice, who would listen, and who would step forward into the unknown. The hidden gate. The days following the bloom of the first garden passed in a quiet rhythm, each one carrying with it the soft echo of laughter that now lingered in the palace halls. Yet, even as the walls seemed warmer, even as sunlight refracted along crystal spires and illuminated the marble floors, Elara felt a tug, a subtle insistence from somewhere beyond the familiar. It was not merely curiosity, it was a sensation of being led, gently but persistently, toward something that had existed unseen for countless years. The shimmer that had once followed her through the corridors seemed now to pulse more deliberately, stretching like a faint finger of light toward the edges of the palace grounds. Each evening, as the day softened into twilight, she found herself drawn toward paths she had never explored, alleys of ivy and forgotten stone, corners where the air smelled faintly of moss and old stories. One afternoon, as the sun tilted low and painted the palace walls in soft amber, Elara wandered beyond the central courtyard, moving with a quiet deliberation that made her steps almost silent. She had learned to notice the subtle signs, the way a shaft of sunlight might catch on a patch of glassy moss, how the ivy along a forgotten wall sometimes shimmered faintly in tones of silver and pale gold, how the faint echo of wind through the spires carried a resonance not unlike the glass garden itself. It was here, in a neglected corner of the eastern gardens, that she saw an archway she had never noticed before, half buried beneath thick ivy and moss. The arch was carved from stone that had weathered centuries, yet even in its aged and forgotten state, it glimmered faintly, almost imperceptibly, as though the stone itself were veined with crystal. Tiny lines of light ran through the carvings, tracing patterns that mirrored those in the garden she had discovered. It was not merely an archway, it was a threshold, a place meant to be found by someone who could perceive what others could not. Her heart quickened. She stepped closer, brushing away the ivy with delicate hands, and as she did, the shimmer brightened slightly, as if acknowledging her attention. Elara took a deep breath. The air here was cooler, tinged with the scent of earth and the faint metallic hint of crystal. Her fingers lingered on the carved edges of the arch, feeling its smooth ridges and intricate flourishes. Something whispered in the quiet of her mind, subtle and almost unspoken, urging her forward. The palace beyond this arch seemed distant, almost unreal, as though the threshold led not only through space, but into another layer of reality entirely. The idea was both exhilarating and unnerving, but she knew without question that she must step through. As her bare feet touched the path beyond the arch, she felt a subtle shift beneath her. The ground seemed softer, more yielding, yet firm enough to support her delicate steps. The path wound gently, curving through a landscape that felt at once familiar and completely new. Delicate blooms, glass-like in their sheen, lined the edges of the trail, reflecting the pale light in soft, ever-changing rainbows. Small tendrils of mist curled along the ground, illuminated by the glow of unseen crystals, giving the air an almost liquid quality. Elara's eyes widened in quiet wonder. It was as if the garden she had discovered in the courtyard had grown, expanded, and woven itself into a hidden network that spanned beyond what anyone could see. The path was not entirely natural. Here and there, stones carved with patterns that mimicked those in the palace gardens were embedded in the earth, their edges catching light in subtle glimmers. Tiny streams wound alongside the trail, their waters clear and cool, reflecting shards of the luminous blooms above. Occasionally, she glimpsed small creatures, barely visible forms of light and air that fluttered or scuttled among the plants, moving with such delicacy that she could not tell whether they were real or merely illusions conjured by the shimmering energy of this hidden place. Each step felt as though it carried her further from the ordinary, deeper into a reality woven from glass, light, and memory. Elara paused often, not from fear, but from awe. She admired the way the soft light refracted through the blossoms, casting gentle patterns onto the path. She could hear the faint hum of the garden's energy, a subtle vibration that resonated with her own heartbeat. The air carried whispers, tiny, almost indecipherable sounds that seemed to carry the memories of those who had once walked this hidden path. Some were joyous, some sorrowful, but all of them were threads woven into the tapestry of this secret place. Every sound, every reflection, every movement seemed alive with intention, as though the garden itself were aware of her presence and welcomed her journey. The archway had been a door, yes, but it was also a promise that beyond it lay something larger than she had imagined. As she followed the winding trail, the path sometimes narrowed, sometimes opened into small clearings where clusters of glass flowers formed patterns reminiscent of constellations. Light from unseen sources, shards embedded in the soil, droplets of dew suspended mid-air, or perhaps luminescent petals cast gentle, shifting rainbows across her pale gown. She paused to touch one of the blossoms, its surface cool and smooth beneath her fingertips, and felt a thrill as the flower responded, a faint pulse of light moving through its veins, acknowledging her presence. The deeper she went, the more the air seemed to change. It became quieter, yet richer in subtle sounds. The soft rustle of leaves that shimmered like silk, the distant echo of water trickling over hidden stones, the faint hum of light as it traveled through the glass-like flora. Time itself seemed to bend here. Minutes could stretch into hours, and yet she felt no fatigue, only a growing sense of purpose. Every step revealed more of the hidden garden, each curve in the path revealing a new wonder, a secret kept for centuries, waiting for her eyes to behold it. And then, as the sun dipped fully behind distant hills, the path began to open into a wider space. The glass-like foliage became denser, more intricate, with hanging crystals swaying gently in the twilight breeze. Tiny buds, luminous and delicate, began to bloom along the edges of the trail, scattering faint rainbows across the soft mist. It was as if the garden were greeting her, slowly waking in response to her presence. Elara walked more slowly now, allowing herself to drink in the beauty, to savor the wonder that surrounded her. She realized that this hidden path was not merely an extension of the first garden, it was its own secret, alive with its own rhythm and memory. She paused beneath a particularly tall arch of intertwined crystal branches, their forms reflecting the last vestiges of sunlight. She looked around, and for a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The shimmer that had followed her here was no longer just a trace, it was an integral part of this hidden place, a living thread connecting her to the garden, the palace, and perhaps even the lands beyond. She felt a thrill of anticipation and a gentle, serene joy, realizing that her journey had only begun. The hidden gate had led her here, but beyond this, there were surely other paths, other mysteries, other gardens waiting to be found. Elara allowed herself to smile softly, the calm expression reflecting not only her awe but her gratitude. She had stepped beyond what was familiar, beyond the limits of the palace she had known, and into a space that seemed timeless, alive with quiet magic. The hidden gate was not merely a threshold of stone and ivy. It was a bridge to a larger world, a world where light and memory intertwined, where glass and crystal captured not just beauty but essence itself. And so, with each gentle step along the winding path, Princess Elara felt the pulse of the hidden garden around her, guiding her forward. Her bare feet brushed against the soft, luminous ground, and the misty air carried with it the faint scent of flowers she could not name. Every shimmer, every echo, every tiny bloom whispered possibilities she could not yet comprehend. She understood, as she had come to understand with the first garden, that the journey was as important as the destination. It was the act of noticing, of walking carefully and observing patiently, that allowed the magic to reveal itself fully by the time the first stars appeared in the sky. She reached a gentle rise in the path, where the hidden garden seemed to pause, holding its breath. Here, the crystals and glass petals reflected the starlight, creating a quiet symphony of shimmer and color. Elara stood barefoot, her gown softly flowing in the twilight breeze, and felt a connection to everything around her: the palace, the first garden, the hidden gate, and the world beyond. The shimmer that had guided her here pulsed softly, a quiet affirmation that this was only the beginning. And as she watched the luminous buds bloom in slow, deliberate rhythm, she knew that the hidden path would continue to unfold, offering wonders yet unseen, and that she, Princess Elara, was ready to follow wherever it might lead. The Garden of Echoes. The hidden path wound gently upward, and with every careful step, the soft shimmer that had guided Elara seemed to grow more insistent, vibrating faintly beneath her senses. The air here was cooler, yet fragrant with scents she could not name. A mixture of earth, crystal, and the subtle sweetness of unseen blossoms. Her bare feet brushed against the soft, luminous ground, sending tiny sparks of reflected light dancing along the edges of the path. Each step felt deliberate, almost sacred, as if the path itself required her attention and respect. She moved slowly, allowing her eyes to drink in the details of this hidden world, noticing how the ivy clung to stone with delicate persistence, how small droplets of dew captured fragments of light, and how the mist that curled along the trail seemed to shimmer with memory. At last, the path opened into a wide, vaulted space, unlike anything she had imagined. It was a garden, yes, but more immense than the first, a cathedral of glass and light, stretching in every direction. The flowers here were larger, their stems bending delicately under the weight of luminous blooms, each one shaped with exquisite precision. But this garden was not silent. From the blossoms came a faint chorus, almost imperceptible at first, soft notes of music, the distant laughter of children, gentle sighs, whispers that carried fragments of conversations long past. Each bloom seemed to hold a memory, a fragment of a world that had once been capturing it in delicate, crystalline form. The effect was subtle, yet overwhelming. It was as though the garden itself had learned to speak, not through words, but through echoes of life. Elara stepped forward carefully, her gown brushing against the faintly glowing grass. She felt the familiar calm rise in her chest, tempered by awe and curiosity. The soft murmurs of the garden surrounded her, creating a rhythm that seemed almost like breathing. When she reached out to touch a bloom, she discovered that it was not just the light that responded, but the sound as well. A single note, clear and pure, rang from the petals, followed by a whisper of laughter and a sigh so gentle that she almost doubted she had heard it at all. She realized that each flower was a vessel, holding fragments of memory, emotion, and sound, shaped and preserved in delicate glass. The garden was vast, and as Elara walked deeper into its heart, she noticed patterns emerging. Some clusters of flowers seemed to respond to her presence, pulsing softly in gentle arcs of color and light. Others remained still, their echoes silent, waiting for her attention. She paused by a cluster of tall, slender blooms, each one glowing faintly in muted tones of silver, lavender, pale gold, and soft blue. When she touched the petals, a gentle melody arose, weaving together faint whispers of voices, the echo of a bird taking flight, and the sound of wind through distant trees. She understood, with a quiet certainty, that the garden was alive in ways she had never imagined. It did not merely reflect light, it reflected experience. It preserved not just beauty, but the essence of moments fleeting, ephemeral, yet captured and eternal in the clarity of glass. Elara wandered slowly, taking care to step lightly. Tiny luminous buds along the path began to bloom in response to her presence, releasing faint, tinkling harmonies that mingled with the garden's natural chorus. She paused again, closing her eyes and letting the echoes wash over her, feeling them not just in her ears, but through her entire being. Each sound carried a story, a fragment of a life she had never known, yet understood instinctively. A child laughing beside a fountain, the quiet sigh of someone resting beneath a willow, the soft murmur of a long-forgotten song. The garden spoke in memories, and she was the audience it had been waiting for. In the center of the garden, the light became more concentrated. A circle of towering blossoms surrounded a pool of still water, perfectly clear, reflecting the sky and the glowing petals above. The air here was tinged with a resonance that made her heart quicken. The echoes were stronger, richer, more intricate. Here, the garden seemed to hold its most precious memories, preserving joy and sorrow, laughter and lament, all in crystalline form. Elara knelt at the edge of the pool, letting her reflection merge with the blooms around her. She felt the pulse of the garden through the soles of her feet, through the tips of her fingers, through her very heart. Each note, each whisper, each sigh reverberated within her, forming a harmony of understanding. She realized that this garden was not merely a second hidden wonder, it was the evolution of the first, a manifestation of memory and emotion, capable of preserving not only what had been beautiful, but what had mattered. It was more than sight. It was feeling, hearing, and comprehending all at once. She felt both humbled and honored, understanding that she had been chosen, in some quiet and unspoken way, to bear witness to these echoes. She was no longer merely an observer. She was a participant, her presence activating the garden's latent magic. Time seemed to stretch. Elara wandered from one bloom to the next, sometimes touching petals, sometimes simply breathing in the luminous air. Each movement brought forth subtle harmonies, a soft layering of sound and light that made her chest ache with wonder. She began to notice the garden's subtler details, delicate veins in the glass petals that shimmered like fine lace, reflections in the tiny pools of dew that captured not only her own image, but fleeting glimpses of past visitors, faint impressions of hands and smiles long gone. The entire space felt alive with intention, as though it had been waiting patiently for someone like her to understand it fully. At one point, a breeze stirred, though no source could be seen. The movement sent ripples across the glass flowers, and with them a gentle cascade of echo's laughter, intertwined with song, sighs entwined with whispers, creating a delicate symphony. Elara smiled softly, feeling a connection not only to the garden, but to the lives that had brushed against it before her. She imagined the countless stories, the forgotten joys, the secret sorrows, all captured here, waiting to be honored and remembered. The garden's magic seemed to respond not just to her touch, but to her attention, her respect, and her wonder. The more she observed, the more alive it became. Tiny buds opened along the winding paths, shedding faint, glittering light, scattering reflections that danced like starlight across her pale gown. Crystals hanging from overhead branches refracted the fading sunlight, creating subtle arcs of color that mingled with the garden's soft melodies. She walked barefoot through the paths, feeling the pulse of life beneath her feet, attuned to the rhythm of echoes, letting them guide her steps. Elara understood that this garden was both fragile and eternal. Its blossoms could shatter if mishandled, yet their essence slight sound. Memory was indestructible, preserved in the crystalline lattice of each petal. She moved slowly, reverently, learning to tread lightly, to touch only when invited, to listen before acting. She felt a profound sense of responsibility. The garden had shared itself with her, and in return, she offered her presence, her care, her understanding. As twilight deepened, the glow of the garden intensified. The soft harmonies of music, laughter, and whispers wove together in a tapestry that filled her senses, surrounding her in light and sound. Tiny, luminous buds opened one by one, releasing faint bursts of radiance that scattered across the paths like falling stars. She paused at the edge of a particularly radiant cluster, letting the echoes wash over her in waves, each pulse resonating with her heartbeat. For a long time, she stood there silently, absorbing the garden's beauty, letting it speak to her without words, letting herself become a part of its quiet symphony. Eventually, she found a spot beneath a canopy of the tallest glass flowers, their petals forming arches overhead. Here, the echoes coalesced, forming a gentle, continuous hum that seemed almost alive. She knelt, resting her hands on the soft, luminous grass, and allowed herself to be fully present. She realized that the garden's magic had never been about mere spectacle. It was about connection, about perceiving and honoring the subtle currents of memory, emotion, and life that flowed quietly beneath the surface of the world. She breathed in deeply, feeling the echoes resonate through her entire being, understanding that she was part of this eternal, fragile, luminous cycle. As night fell completely, stars appeared overhead, reflected in the glass blooms around her. The garden's whispers softened, carrying a gentle promise that the echoes she had witnessed were only the beginning, that more paths, more memories, more wonders awaited discovery. Elara rose to her feet, her gown flowing softly around her ankles, her bare feet still in contact with the luminous earth. She looked around, smiling gently, feeling a deep sense of serenity and joy. She understood, more clearly than ever, that the hidden garden was alive not only with light, but with life itself, and that her journey through it had only just begun. The veil of silences. Elara ventured deeper into the garden of echoes. The luminous hum of music, laughter, and whispers that had accompanied her along the winding paths began to fade. A subtle coolness settled over the air, and the brilliance of the blossoms dimmed, replaced by shadows that seemed to stretch and linger like quiet memories waiting to be noticed. She paused, sensing the shift immediately, a gentle hush that was not emptiness, but anticipation. The path curved softly, leading her to a secluded section of the garden, unlike any she had encountered before. Here, the glass flowers were muted in color, almost translucent, their edges faintly outlined in silver light. Not a note rose from them, not a laugh, not a whisper. The air itself felt suspended, waiting. Elara stepped carefully, her bare feet brushing against the cool, luminous grass, which reflected only the faintest glimmer of light from the distant blooms. She noticed that each flower, though delicate and perfectly formed, seemed frozen in time, petals slightly curled as if caught mid-motion, droplets of dew suspended like frozen tears. The silence was profound, and yet it was not heavy. It was expectant, almost reverent. She understood at once that these flowers were unlike the others. They held moments forgotten, memories unspoken, sorrows carried silently. Each bloom seemed to pulse faintly, a subtle heartbeat only perceptible to someone willing to stop and truly listen. Elara crouched beside a cluster of particularly dim flowers. She reached out, letting her fingertips hover above the glass petals without touching them. In the absence of sound, she became aware of subtle vibrations in the air, the almost imperceptible resonance of lives that had left their echoes behind. She realized that to awaken these blooms, she would need more than curiosity. She would need patience, empathy, and a heart open enough to receive what had been withheld. The silence was not emptiness. It was invitation. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to breathe slowly, feeling her own heartbeat synchronize with the subtle rhythms of the garden. Each inhale carried the faint scent of glass and earth. Each exhale released a whisper of warmth. The longer she remained still, the more she began to perceive delicate traces of sound buried within the silence. A faint sigh of longing, the gentle scrape of a chair long abandoned, a whisper of words that had never been spoken aloud. With every soft revelation, the flowers trembled slightly, as if acknowledging her attention. Elara understood that the garden did not demand loudness or force it, responded to presence, to gentle awareness, to the quiet willingness to honor what had been hidden. She walked slowly among the frozen blossoms, letting her gaze linger on each one. There was a subtle melancholy in their stillness, a beauty tinged with unfulfilled dreams and forgotten sorrows. One flower, with petals slightly bowed, as though in quiet mourning, seemed to resonate faintly with the memory of a promise never kept. Another held the trace of laughter that had been too fleeting to last, frozen mid-chime, waiting for ears willing to remember. Elara bent low, breathing softly, letting her own heart infuse the space with attention and care. Gradually, the faintest flicker of light began to stir in the blooms, tiny pulses that mirrored her heartbeat, gentle ripples that promised awakening. She realized that this section of the garden reflected more than just forgotten moments. It reflected the unspoken truths within herself as well. As she moved slowly through the paths, she acknowledged memories she had tucked away, emotions she had hidden in quiet corners of her mind, feelings that had never been named. Each recognition seemed to coax the glass petals into subtle motion, a trembling, a soft glow, a hint of color returning. The silence, once daunting, became intimate, like a conversation conducted without words. Elara understood that she could awaken the flowers only by offering a part of herself, her presence, her empathy, her openness to the depths of memory and feeling. Time passed differently here. Minutes felt like hours, and yet she never tired. She paused beside a particularly tall bloom, its petals catching the faintest silver light, and rested her palms against its base. She let her mind quiet, letting go of expectation, letting herself simply be present. Slowly, imperceptibly, at first, a note emerged, single, clear sound, faint but pure. Then another, until the garden itself seemed to breathe softly, a gentle hum weaving together the echoes of sorrow, dreams, and silences it had held so patiently. Elara felt the vibrations through her hands, her feet, her chest, and her heart. The garden was alive, and she was part of its awakening. She wandered further, discovering hidden clusters where the glass flowers seemed almost black in their dimness, yet radiated a quiet power. These held the deepest silences, moments of grief, longing, hesitation, and unfulfilled desire. Standing among them, Elara felt a wave of empathy wash over her, a profound recognition of the human condition, the quiet burdens that so often went unseen. She knelt, resting her head lightly against the stem of a bloom, feeling the faint pulse of memory beneath her touch. In that moment, she realized that the garden did not merely preserve emotion, it offered understanding, the chance to witness and honor what had been lost, overlooked, or forgotten. The longer she lingered, the more the garden responded. Petals trembled in unison, tiny glimmers of light spreading across the dim section. Whispers began to rise, soft and melodic, not as voices, but as echoes of feeling, harmonizing with the subtle resonance of her own heartbeat. The flowers opened slowly, delicately, revealing glimpses of color previously hidden, muted blues, soft silvers, pale golds, and gentle lavenders that seemed to radiate from memory itself. Every bloom carried a story, a fragment of emotion, a trace of life once lived. Elara felt honored and humbled. She understood that the act of listening, of quiet reflection, of offering her own heart in stillness, was what allowed these forgotten moments to return to light. At the center of the veil of silence lay the oldest blooms, larger and more fragile than the others. Their glass petals seemed to carry weight, though they were delicate to the touch, and their faint glow reflected centuries of unspoken emotion. Elara approached slowly, her breath steady, her movements deliberate and respectful. She placed her hands lightly on the ground around them, letting her presence and intention merge with the garden's rhythm. A soft vibration ran through the earth, traveling up her feet, through her body, and into her hands. The flowers shivered, and then the first note of sound emerged, single, quiet, hauntingly beautiful note that seemed to rise from the earth itself. It was the beginning of a melody that would awaken all the echoes held here, and she felt tears well in her eyes as the beauty of it enveloped her. Elara remained there for what seemed an eternity, moving slowly from one bloom to the next, letting her fingers trace faint patterns on the glass petals, letting her mind quiet, letting her heart open. The silence around her was not oppressive. It was intimate, sacred, and profoundly alive. She realized that the garden did not demand performance, or understanding it demanded presence. The more she gave herself, the more the garden revealed itself. Soft lights pulsed, faint whispers emerged, tiny blooms trembled and opened, and the once frozen section began to breathe by nightfall. The dim, silent corner of the garden had transformed. Subtle light now shimmered through every bloom, harmonies of sound intertwined with faint rainbows of color. The glass petals reflected her calm smile, her gentle movements, and the quiet reverence she had shown. The garden had awakened, not merely to her touch, but to her willingness to listen, to honor, and to share in its memory. Elara stood barefoot among the luminous blooms, her pale gown softly flowing around her ankles, her long hair loose behind her shoulders, the small crown upon her head catching the faint glimmer of the awakened garden. She felt a profound serenity and joy, a sense of connection to every forgotten story, every unspoken dream, every quiet sorrow the garden had preserved. The veil of silence was no longer a place of shadows, but a sanctuary of understanding. Elara realized that the act of listening, of offering her heart in gentle reflection had breathed life into these hidden echoes. She knew now that every garden, every bloom, every whisper held a purpose to be remembered, honored, and shared. And she, Princess Elara, was the witness, the participant, and the caretaker of this quiet, fragile, radiant magic as she finally stepped back, allowing the glow to settle softly around her. She understood that this garden, like all that had come before, was not static. It would continue to awaken, to shimmer, and to echo, as long as someone with an open heart walked among its paths, listening, reflecting, and sharing in its silent beauty. And with that realization, Elara continued her journey, ready for the next path, the next hidden wonder, the next echo waiting to be discovered. The keeper of echoes. The quiet serenity of the veil of silence lingered around Elara as she stepped lightly from the awakened blooms, the soft glow of glass petals fading gently into the twilight. She moved with care, barefoot on the luminous paths, aware of the fragile harmony of this hidden garden. Every note, every shimmer of light, every subtle vibration beneath her feet seemed to acknowledge her presence, like a delicate chorus of gratitude for the attention she had offered. And yet, the garden held more secrets. Beyond the cluster of newly awakened blossoms, she felt a subtle shift in the air, a deeper resonance, a weight of anticipation that had not been present before. It was as though the garden itself was holding its breath as she rounded a curve in the path. Elara saw a figure emerge from the shadows. At first, she thought it a reflection of light, a trick of the crystalline flora. But as the figure drew closer, she realized it was no illusion. The guardian stood before her, tall and fluid in form, cloaked in fragments of mirrored glass that caught the dim glow of the garden and scattered it into 1,000 delicate reflections. The shards shimmered like a river of broken light, yet the figure moved with perfect grace, its presence neither threatening nor intrusive. It carried both the brightness of illumination and the weight of shadow, the soft resonance of memory and the stillness of silence. Elara paused, awed and reverent, unsure whether she should speak or simply observe. The guardian tilted its head slightly, a gesture that felt like both acknowledgement and invitation, though it had no mouth to form words. A quiet understanding passed between them. The guardian was here to guide, not to command, to reveal, not to impose. Its mirrored cloak reflected fragments of the garden, fragments of herself, and fragments of the hidden echoes she had just begun to awaken. Each reflection seemed to hold a story, a memory, a shard of life waiting to be noticed, understood, and honored. Slowly, the guardian turned and began to move along the path, its mirrored fragments catching the dim light and scattering it like whispers of illumination. Elara followed, her steps careful and deliberate, mindful not to disturb the delicate balance of glass, mist, and light around her. The path narrowed, winding deeper into a secluded section of the garden she had not yet explored. Here, the air was cooler still, tinged with the faint scent of silvered petals and quiet longing. Each step seemed heavier in significance, as though she were walking toward the heart of not just the garden, but of memory itself. Finally, the path opened into a small, circular clearing, and at its center stood a single blossom, unlike any she had seen before. It was larger than the others, its petals tightly closed, absorbing the faint light of the surrounding garden. Unlike the luminous blooms she had awakened earlier, this one remained dark, a quiet sentinel in the heart of the garden. The guardian stopped beside it, its mirrored shards catching and reflecting her image in 1,000 tiny fragments. Elara felt the pulse of the garden through the soles of her feet, a subtle vibration that seemed to emanate from the unlit blossom itself. She understood at once this was the heart of all echoes, the keeper of memory. Waiting for her touch, the guardian extended what could be called a hand, or perhaps merely the suggestion of one, its mirrored surface catching the last remnants of fading light. Elara stepped forward slowly, her bare feet brushing the soft grass, and placed her palms lightly on the ground around the blossom. She felt the resonance immediately, subtle but insistent, a vibration that moved through the earth, through the roots of every glass flower, through the mist curling around her, and into her very being. The unlit blossom seemed to breathe beneath her touch, a gentle pulse that matched the rhythm of her own heart. Closing her eyes, Elara allowed herself to focus entirely on the moment. She let go of expectation, of control, of fear, and simply offered herself the calmness of her presence, the openness of her heart, the attention she had carried through every step of her journey. Slowly, imperceptibly, the first hint of light appeared within the blossom, faint but unmistakable. It glimmered at the edges of the petals, a promise of life waiting to emerge. She felt the guardian's presence as a quiet encouragement, a steady reminder that she was part of the unfolding, not merely a witness. As she lingered, the light deepened. Tiny cracks of brilliance spread across the petals, revealing subtle patterns within the glass, intricate swirls and delicate lines that seemed to contain fragments of all the echoes she had encountered so far. Laughter and whispers, sorrow and silence, dreams and memories, all intertwined in the crystalline heart of this single bloom. The sound was soft, almost like a hum, yet it carried weight and significance, a resonance that seemed to stretch across the garden and beyond. Elara felt tears welling in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the profound beauty of connection, of understanding, of witnessing something eternal and fragile all at once. The guardian moved closer, its mirrored fragments shifting and reflecting the growing light of the bloom. Elara sensed that this being carried the knowledge of the garden, the wisdom of echoes preserved, and the patient care required to awaken what had remained hidden. She felt no fear, only reverence and gratitude, understanding that the garden, the guardian, and herself were linked by something deeper than sight, deeper than sound, deeper than time. It was the essence of memory, the rhythm of reflection, the quiet pulse of life waiting to be acknowledged. With careful hands, Elara traced the edges of the petals, feeling their delicate resistance and smooth surface. As she did, a cascade of light and sound began to emerge, subtle at first, then growing more pronounced. The glass bloom responded to her presence, to her heart, to the quiet reflection she offered. Faint melodies intertwined with whispers, sighs, and laughter, forming a symphony of echoes that resonated throughout the clearing. The guardian observed silently, a steady presence, refracting the bloom's light in fragments that scattered like stars across the misty garden. Elara allowed herself to be fully present, breathing with the rhythm of the blossom, feeling the pulse of the garden beneath her. Tiny buds around the clearing began to respond, opening slowly in harmony with the unlit heart bloom. Light spread outward, delicate and shimmering, illuminating the mirrored guardian and the surrounding glass flowers. She felt a deep sense of unity, as if every echo she had witnessed, every memory she had honored, every silent note she had listened to, had led her here to this moment of awakening. The garden seemed to sigh softly, a gentle exhalation of light and sound, as the heart blossom fully awakened. Its petals opened completely, scattering brilliant shards of rainbow-reflected light across the clearing. The whispers and harmonies of the entire garden joined in, a chorus that encompassed both joy and sorrow, silence and song. Elara felt her own heart resonate with the symphony, each beat attuned to the rhythm of the awakened bloom. She realized that the act of touching, of listening, of offering her presence had unlocked something profound. The garden's essence, the keeper of all echoes, had shared itself fully with her. The guardian lingered for a moment longer, reflecting the light in infinite facets, before it began to dissolve gradually into the shimmering air, leaving behind only the memory of its presence and the faint sparkle of mirrored fragments. Elara watched, understanding that its purpose had been fulfilled. It had guided her, shown her the way, and now she was entrusted with the care and reverence of this fragile, luminous world. The heart blossom pulsed gently, radiating warmth, light, and sound in a delicate balance, and she knew that the echoes contained within it would forever carry the touch of her attention and her heart for a long while. She stood silently in the clearing, absorbing the harmony, the beauty, and the profound sense of connection. The garden, once hidden and silent, now thrummed with life, a quiet symphony of light, memory, and sound. She walked slowly among the blossoms, letting each note, each shimmer, each echo pass through her, carrying a sense of understanding and reverence. She understood, more clearly than ever, that the garden was not merely a place of wonder, it was a living chronicle of experience, a delicate and eternal repository of the unseen and unspoken. As twilight deepened into night, the clearing shimmered with the soft glow of awakened blooms. Elara's pale gown flowed gently around her ankles, her long hair loose behind her shoulders, the small crown upon her head catching the reflected light of the heart blossom. Barefoot, she walked among the awakened flowers, feeling the pulse of the garden beneath her feet, aware that she was now both witness and participant, guardian and friend. The keeper of echoes had entrusted her with its secret, and she would honor it with every step she took within this luminous, fragile world. And so, Princess Elara lingered in the heart of the Garden of Echoes, fully present, fully aware, fully alive the beauty, memory, and light that surrounded her. She understood, as she had come to understand in every step of her journey, that true magic was not in spectacle, but in attention, presence, and the quiet willingness to touch the extraordinary with a tender heart. The Palace of Song. Elara stood before the final bloom, the heart of all echoes, her palms lightly resting on the luminous glass petals. The air shimmered with anticipation, not harsh or demanding, but soft, patient, as though the garden itself was holding its breath, waiting for the culmination of what had been nurtured and awakened. The heartbeat of the garden pulsed beneath her bare feet, gentle and insistent, flowing upward like a current of light and memory through her body. Every vibration, every subtle resonance carried the promise of a revelation yet to come. She inhaled deeply the fragrance of glass, earth, and unseen blossoms filling her senses, and she offered her presence fully, without hesitation, without expectation. Slowly, a faint glow emerged within the petals of the final blossom. It began as a spark, a single point of brilliance that shimmered faintly, reflecting in the mirrored fragments of the guardian who had guided her moments before, though now that being had vanished into whispers of light, the glow expanded, tracing delicate veins across each petal, like rivers of color frozen in crystal and now awakening. Tiny musical notes, faint at first, emerged from the bloom. A single chime, a soft sigh, a whisper of laughter. Elara closed her eyes, letting the harmony wash over her, feeling it not only in her ears, but through every fiber of her being, as if the garden and she were breathing together in perfect resonance. Her hands traced the curves of the petals, careful not to disturb their fragile perfection. The sound intensified, delicate chords layering with the memory of every echo she had encountered in the Garden of Echoes. Laughter, sorrow, joy, whispers, sighs, every emotion, every memory she had witnessed flowed together in a symphony. And then, almost imperceptibly, the bloom began to tremble, not in fear, but in excitement, anticipation, and the profound joy of finally being seen. Light scattered outward, illuminating the surrounding flowers, which trembled in response, opening gently, releasing the stored echoes into the air as the echoes rose. The garden itself seemed to shift and expand. Light spilled from every blossom, cascading in gentle arcs across paths and pools of luminous dew. The mist, once subtle, became alive with rainbows, each droplet a prism carrying fragments of the memories and emotions contained within the glass petals. The music of laughter and song intertwined with soft sighs and whispers, forming a delicate harmony that was not just heard but felt, vibrating through the earth, through the palace walls, through the mountains and rivers beyond. Elara felt the pulse of the kingdom itself in her chest, a rhythm born of memory, presence, and light. She walked slowly among the blooming flowers, each step scattering reflections that danced like stars along the paths. The glass petals responded to her touch and her attention, releasing not only sound but subtle flickers of color-muted silvers, pale golds, soft blues, and gentle lavenders that shimmered in the twilight. The garden's symphony grew richer with every passing moment, a chorus of voices both past and present, known and forgotten. Elara understood that the final bloom was not simply a flower, it was the heart of the kingdom's stories, the nexus of memory and emotion, the point from which all echoes could flow freely. As the garden's light expanded outward, she noticed that the shimmer was not confined to the walls of the palace. From her vantage point, she could see the glass light stretching across courtyards, rooftops, and terraces, reaching far into the villages beyond. Rivers gleamed as if filled with molten crystal, reflecting the echoes of laughter, song, and memory. Mountains shimmered faintly in the distance, their peaks capturing light from the awakened gardens, as if even the most distant places had been waiting for this moment. The kingdom itself became a living mosaic of light, sound, and memory, a vast glass garden, alive with voices that would never be forgotten. Elara closed her eyes, letting the symphony envelop her completely. She felt the echoes of countless lives brushing against her, not as shadows, but as companions, as threads woven into the fabric of this luminous world. Every note, every sigh, every whisper carried significance, a reminder that even the smallest moment, the quietest memory, could hold beauty and meaning. She felt gratitude for the garden, for the guardians, and for the quiet trust placed in her to witness and nurture this fragile, radiant magic. The palace corridors, once silent, now thrummed with echoes that no longer belonged solely to the past. They were alive in the present, flowing outward with light and song, filling every corner of the kingdom. Tiny buds along the edges of the garden opened in slow, deliberate motion, scattering further shards of refracted light into the misty air. Crystal droplets fell like rain, each carrying a reflection of a memory, a laugh, or a dream, joining the symphony that stretched beyond the palace walls. Elara felt a wave of warmth spread through her, a quiet exhilaration tempered by reverence. She walked barefoot among the blooms, her gown flowing softly around her ankles, her hair loose behind her shoulders, the small crown on her head catching the refracted light. With every step, she became more attuned to the rhythm of this vast, living glass garden, a rhythm that resonated with her heartbeat. Her breath, her very being. Above her, the sky deepened to a velvety indigo, yet the kingdom glimmered as if the stars themselves had descended to the earth. The echoes of song, laughter, and memory were no longer contained. They flowed freely across rooftops, into the streets, over rivers, through forests, and into the mountains. The shimmer touched every life, every creature, every corner of the realm, reminding all who observed that memory, love, and joy were eternal when honored and shared. Even in the smallest villages, children paused to notice the gentle glow, the soft chime of echoes in the air, and felt inexplicable delight. Travelers on distant roads glimpsed the luminous rivers and smiled, sensing the quiet magic that had awakened the kingdom. Elara paused by a small pool in the heart of the garden, the reflection of the sky and blossoms shimmering together like a liquid mirror. She watched as each echo moved in harmony, light and sound dancing in perfect rhythm. She reached down, letting her fingers brush the water's surface, sending ripples outward. The ripples carried light and song, scattering further across the garden, blending with echoes already flowing through the kingdom. It felt like a culmination of everything she had learned: patience, attention, empathy, and the courage to touch what is fragile, to honor what is extraordinary. She understood that awakening the heart blossom had not only transformed the garden, it had transformed the kingdom itself. And in some subtle way, it had transformed her as well. The palace, now alive with shimmering light and resonant echoes, no longer felt like a place of isolation. Corridors that had once whispered only silence now hummed with a gentle chorus of memory and laughter. Crystal flowers glimmered in every courtyard, each bloom a tiny vessel of the kingdom's collective story. Even the walls, carved from pale stone, seemed to reflect the light of the awakened gardens, glowing faintly with the resonance of past joy and present wonder. The kingdom itself had become a living glass palace, a palace of song, memory, and radiant light. Elara wandered among the blooms one last time before night fully claimed the sky. She bent to touch a particularly radiant flower, feeling the pulse of life within its petals. She smiled softly, her calm expression reflecting the serenity and fulfillment of the moment. She understood that the magic of this kingdom, this palace, and this garden was not in the spectacle, but in the quiet attention, in the gentle respect, and in the willingness to offer one's heart fully. Each echo, each note, each whisper was alive because someone had listened, someone had cared, someone had been present as the first stars glimmered above. The final echoes scattered like delicate chimes across the kingdom. Villages, rivers, mountains, and forests shimmered with glasslight, their hidden stories revealed. The laughter of children, the soft sighs of travelers, the whispered memories of generations all mingled in perfect harmony. The kingdom, vast and eternal, was now a living symphony, a palace of song that would continue to sing for all time. Elara stood barefoot in the glowing garden, her gown flowing gently around her, her long hair loose behind her shoulders, the small crown resting delicately on her head. She felt the pulse of the kingdom, the light of the blooms, and the quiet resonance of every memory she had touched. She breathed deeply, allowing herself to feel the full weight and beauty of the moment. The journey through hidden paths, silent gardens, and heart blossoms had led her here to a kingdom alive with voices, alive with song, alive with light that would never fade. Luminous expanse, Princess Elara, the smallest echoes, the most fragile memories, could shape a kingdom, fill a palace, and awaken the hearts of all who dwelled within it. The palace of song, the garden of echoes, the heart of glasslight. They were one, eternal and luminous. And with that understanding, she walked gently among the blossoms, the symphony of her kingdom rising around her, a chorus that would never end. Thank you for joining me tonight in The Princess and the Glass Garden, Part 2. May your dreams be gentle and your sleep deep. If you found peace here, don't forget to follow Whispers of the Night for more stories, more whispers, and more rest. Until next time, may the echoes of the garden guide you softly into dreams. Good night.